Good morning, everyone, and welcome back once again to Morning Musings. My name is Don K. Preston. I am the president of Preterist Research Institute of Ardmore, Oklahoma. We're looking at the doctrine of the new heaven and the new earth as it relates to the resurrection of 1 Corinthians 15. Everyone admits, okay, so-called end of time, end of the age, coming of the Lord, judgment, resurrection, new heaven, and new earth. The problem is we are told that the new heaven and new earth is a physical reality. It's this physical planet that is renovated, reconstructed, restored to an Edenic physical reality, overlooking the fact that Eden was typological. The physical, the natural pointed to something spiritual. Nonetheless, in the last video, I shared with you the tremendous significance of Isaiah 65:17, in which God said, "For behold, I create a new heaven and a new earth, and the former shall not be remembered." I shared with you that the Hebrew word is zakar. The word zakar can mean literally just simply remembering something, very, very mundane. However, in passage after passage after passage in the Old Testament, the word remember has a covenantal significance. It means that if Israel was being obedient to Torah, God would remember them within the context and within the light of that of the covenant, and He would bless them. On the contrary, if Israel was violating the covenant, Yahweh would remember His covenant with Israel and the law of blessings and cursings of Deuteronomy 28 to 30, and He would bring the covenant curses on her. That would be national captivity, destruction, invasion. You can see that in Leviticus chapter 26 as well, which is the parallel to the law of blessings and cursings in Deuteronomy. Now, I want to pick up on that, and I want to share with you how important it is to see Isaiah 65 in a covenantal context. Notice once again that God is talking to and about Old Covenant Israel. "You are those," the Lord said, "that make a feast for the idols. You are the ones that forget my holy mountain," which is Zion. "You are the ones that forget my name." Now, if they forget, see, they're forgetting their covenant with Him. They didn't forget mentally that God existed, but they forgot their covenant obligations to Him. They forgot their covenant vows, if you please, to Him. And so as a result of that, that is when the Lord said, "Because you forget me, I'm going to destroy you and create a new heaven and a new earth." Do you see that covenantal context there? Then further, we have the marvelous promise of the giving of the new covenant. Jeremiah 31, verse 34. The Lord promised that under the new covenant, their sins and their iniquities will I remember no more. In other words, He won't bring those sins to covenantal remembrance and bring, shall we say, covenantal wrath. The word remember in so many of these contexts deals strictly and solely with covenant remembrance. Now, let me show you an incredible text that is so very often ignored. There's always tremendous controversy. When did the law of Moses pass away? Well, we're told the law of Moses passed away at the cross. Okay, if the law of Moses passed away at the cross, then God's covenant, along with the provisions for covenant wrath or covenant blessings, was done away. Well, in Revelation chapter 16, we are told that Babylon was about to come under God's judgment. Why? Because Babylon had killed the prophets. Babylon is where the Lord was slain. Babylon is the city guilty of killing Jesus' apostles and prophets. Now watch this. In Revelation 16 and verse 19, in describing the impending judgment, it says that the great city was divided into three parts, and the cities of the nations fell, and great Babylon, now watch this, was remembered before God to give her the cup of the wine of the fierceness of his wrath. Now look, in the Old Testament, in Leviticus chapter 26, when God remembered, took note of Israel's sin and poured out his wrath, that's strictly in a covenantal context. This is driven home by this fact. Babylon in Revelation is the harlot, drawing from the Old Covenant references to the word harlot. You know, over and over and over, the book of Revelation draws from Hosea and Ezekiel, etc., etc. Well, guess what? In the Old Testament, the word harlot is used some 91 times. 86 out of those 91 times, the word harlot is used to speak of a wife that broke the covenant bond, the covenant conditions, the covenant relationship. So what do we have? In the book of Revelation, we have God remembering his covenant with Babylon. It wasn't simply God looking down from heaven and going, oh boy, you know, Babylon's a really bad city. I remember her sin. I remember what she's done. No, notice once again what the language says. She was remembered before God to give her the cup of the wine of the fierceness of his wrath. That wrath sprang from that remembrance. That remembrance has to do with the fact she was a harlot, an unfaithful wife, a wife that broke the covenant. So, since God in Revelation chapter 16 verse 19 was going to remember Babylon, bring covenant provisions, covenant wrath to bear, if the law of Moses, with all of those covenant provisions for wrath, was done away with in AD 33 at the cross, that doesn't work. What covenant with provisions for destruction of the city, destruction of a nation, where do we find those provisions of covenant wrath in the gospel? We don't. And when you compound that with, when you conflate that with, that throughout the entirety of the book of Revelation, covenantal language is used over and over and over and over and over again. Language taken directly out of the Old Testament where God spoke of his covenant with Israel. Revelation 16:19 is bringing to bear the covenant that God had with Israel because of her violation of that covenant in killing his servants. Now, that agrees so beautifully with Isaiah 65. Why? Because in Isaiah 65, Israel failed to remember Yahweh. She was unfaithful to the covenant. She would be destroyed. God would create new heaven and new earth. Revelation, what do we find? Babylon, the harlot, is unfaithful to the wedding covenant. God remembers the provisions of the covenant. He destroys her, and the new heaven and the new earth comes in. You see the beauty? You see the perfect harmony? And this shows that the new heaven and new earth is all about covenant. It is all about Israel's covenant relationship, Israel's covenant creation, if you please, versus the new covenant creation that was coming, when old covenant Israel would be destroyed and God would create the new heaven and the new earth. Well, thank you so much for joining me for this morning's Morning Musings. In the meantime, let me encourage you again, get a copy of my book, The Elements Shall Melt with Fervent Heat. Go to my website, donkpreston.com, bibleprophecy.com, and order the book. Be sure to mention that you saw the offer on YouTube or Facebook, and I'll pay your shipping. Okay, look, I'm not going to have a video in the morning reviewing and responding to Joel Richardson's book, Mystery Babylon. I'm going to give my voice a little bit more time to heal. Lord willing, next week I'll pick up with that. We will continue our examination of his book. In the meantime, thanks again. Lord willing, we'll see you on Monday. You have a fantastic and safe weekend.